My favorite crab meat pizza is here. Mom, eat as much as you like, my daughter-in-law says, placing the plate in front of me with an unusual kindness. I'm not naive enough to miss this sudden change in behavior, though. I suspect my eldest child and his wife are up to something, trying to trick me with food. They've been unfriendly and pulled various stunts on me before, so this sudden kindness seems suspicious. I'm not someone who'll easily let myself be looked down upon. I can protect myself and even turn the tables on them if I need to. My name is Mary. I'm a housewife in my 60s, living alone since my husband passed away years ago. When he died, my eldest child and their spouse suggested I move in with them. They were newlyweds at the time, and I wanted them to enjoy that special period of their marriage, so I declined. Instead, they moved into a house nearby, saying they were worried about me. I was grateful for their thoughtfulness. They visited often, even when I told them they didn't need to. My child would say, "I'm worried about you, Mom," and my daughter-in-law would come over even if my child was busy, saying, "I want us to get along." I was proud of my child for choosing such a caring partner, though I didn't understand the real reason behind their kindness. Looking back, I feel frustrated with my own naivety, as it's rare to receive kindness without strings attached. I fell for their sweet words, only to later find out their true intentions. One day, they visited and stayed the night since they didn't have plans the next day. Not wanting to intrude on their time as a couple, I suggested they could go home since it was nearby, but my daughter-in-law insisted. "We want to get closer to you, so we'd like to stay." So, I offered them the guest room. My late husband built this house, which is far too big for just me, so there are many empty rooms. The guest room was a bit dusty, but my daughter-in-law helped clean it. She's skilled with housework and has been helpful since marrying my child, so I had a good impression of her. In the middle of the night, I woke up thirsty and went to the kitchen. On the way, I noticed the light was still on in the living room. Curious, I peeked in and saw my child and their spouse sitting on the sofa, talking. I couldn't resist listening to what they were saying. I heard my eldest child complain, "I'm exhausted, that old lady makes us do too much. Just hang in there a bit longer." My eldest child said to his wife, "Once we get Mom's inheritance, we're done with her. If her husband hadn't been a CEO, we wouldn't even have to go through this act. She's so easily fooled just because we're kind to her. Mom's always been emotionally vulnerable, so she'll probably leave everything to us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was their kindness just a lie to take my late husband's inheritance? All those times they said, "We're family, and we want to support each other," was it all fake? Why were they so focused on my inheritance? I didn't know of any money troubles, but maybe they were struggling and I just wasn't aware of it. Wanting to understand, I asked around the neighborhood and talked to some friends. Eventually, I discovered the shocking truth. My eldest and his wife were deeply involved in gambling and had piled up massive debts, more than they could ever repay with regular jobs. I finally understood their desperation for the inheritance. My late husband had left them a significant sum, but they'd wasted it all and turned it into debt. Their kindness toward me was just a ploy to get more money. From that point on, I kept my distance. When they'd offer to help, saying, "We want to be there for you, Mom," I'd politely respond, "Thank you, but I've grown used to living alone. Please focus on your own lives." My daughter-in-law's expression would turn stern, annoyed that I wasn't following their plan. I don't need kindness that comes with expectations. One day, after keeping my distance for a while, I got a call from my daughter-in-law. "We need to talk," she said. When I arrived at their home, she led me to the living room, where she spoke in a serious tone. "Mom, do you have a new love interest?" she asked, surprising me completely. I had no idea where she got this idea, but she continued, saying, "You've been distant lately, so I got suspicious. I didn't think you'd be so cold. Have you forgotten Dad, who worked so hard for you? Now you just want to be happy for yourself?" "There's no one else," I assured her, "and you're mistaken." But she didn't listen, convinced that if I found someone new, it would threaten her and my child's plans to get my inheritance. "Mom," she added coldly, "you should really reconsider dating at your age. Have you thought about your position?" Her words stung. "Why would you say something so cruel?" "I don't mean to sound harsh," my daughter-in-law said. "I'm just worried about you, Mom. What if this person is deceiving you? You'd be the one getting hurt." And I couldn't stand that. But I could see right through her. She wasn't worried about me. She was only trying to protect her chance at my inheritance. Still, she hid her true feelings behind a caring mask. I decided to play along and wait for the right moment to reveal their true intentions. And that moment came sooner than expected. "Happy birthday, Mom. It's just a little something for you," my eldest said. handing me a bag from a fancy pizza place. Inside were several pizzas, including my favorite with crab meat. "Thank you, let me just put these on plates," I said, but my daughter-in-law quickly took over. "No, you're the star today, Mom, just sit down, I'll do it." She took the bag and went to the kitchen, with my eldest child following her. To anyone else, it would look like a thoughtful birthday celebration, but I knew better. I had a feeling something was up. Soon, they returned with plates, and in front of me was the crab meat pizza. "Here's your favorite, Mom, eat up." My eldest smiled, nodding in agreement, but I wasn't fooled. Their overly kind behavior made me suspicious. Now that my husband was gone, I had to protect myself. They would regret trying to make a fool out of me. "Well, it does look delicious," I said thoughtfully, "but my tastes have changed lately. I think I'd like the foie gras on your plate instead." I reached over for my eldest child's plate. I'd always said I didn't like foie gras, so that plate had extra on it. "Wait, Mom," my eldest child protested, but I tilted my head in fake confusion. "Is there a problem? You used to love crab meat too, didn't you?" "Well, I guess my taste has changed too," my eldest stammered. "I actually prefer foie gras now." "Then let's not be biased," I said with a smile, "and share both." Suddenly, my eldest child's face turned pale. The crab meat pizza, my supposed favorite, was only on my plate. They had planned something sneaky, and their reluctance to eat it confirmed my suspicions. I picked up a slice of the crab meat pizza and held it out. "It looks so delicious, why don't you have a bite?" With no way out, my eldest took a reluctant bite, bracing for whatever they had planned. My daughter-in-law looked at my eldest with concern, her face full of worry. My eldest child's face had turned pale, almost green. "Oh, you don't look well. Maybe the pizza didn't taste good, Mom," my daughter-in-law said, clearly panicked. "I'm sorry, let's just call it a day. I'll make something fresh for you another time." She sounded nervous, as if she wanted to end the meal as quickly as possible. "Your husband doesn't look well," I replied. "Why don't you stay the night? It wouldn't be safe for you to go home like this." "No, we'll leave," my daughter-in-law insisted, trying to make excuses. Her attempts to hide her panic only made it clear that she was eager to leave. I'd always thought they were terrible liars. They fell apart whenever something unexpected happened. Then, something strange happened. After a few moments, my eldest child suddenly collapsed with a thud. When I went to check, I found him snoring. It was clear he had been drugged with a sleeping pill. "Oh, looks like he fell asleep," I said, tilting my head, but my daughter-in-law lost her composure and shouted, "Enough, why won't things go as planned? We talked about how important today was." She shook my eldest, trying to wake him. Wake up, she cried, even slapping his cheek, but he stayed asleep. Stunned, I watched as her true nature finally came out. Ignoring me, she began to reveal everything. "I've been pretending to be the perfect daughter-in-law, thinking if I sweet-talked you enough, I'd get the inheritance and pay off our debts. Today was supposed to be the final step. We planned to put you to sleep and steal your bank card. It's all your fault this didn't work. What are you going to do about it?" She glared at me, frustrated and angry. So, they had planned to drug me on my own birthday and steal my bank card. Using someone's birthday to pull off such a cruel scheme, that was truly despicable. I decided to be honest with her. "Actually, I've known all along that you've been nice to me just for the money. That's why I kept my distance and didn't eat the pizza. I'm not as foolish as you two seem to think." My words left her shocked. She really thought I hadn't figured out their scheme. "Did you really think I was clueless?" I asked. "I've been suspicious of your sudden kindness from the start. I even overheard you talking about the inheritance that time you stayed over. It's foolish to discuss your plans in the very house of the person you're trying to deceive." "Don't call us fools," she snapped back. "We've been trying our best." "If this is your best, then it's no wonder you're in debt. Is gambling how you handle things? It's really pitiful." At the mention of debt, her face turned pale. "How much do you know?" she asked, visibly anxious. "I did some digging," I replied. "I found out about your gambling habits and the huge debt you've piled up. I was shocked at how much trouble you're in." She looked defeated, and her tone changed. "Mom, I'm really sorry. Please forgive us. We can't manage without some money. Please lend us some, and I promise we'll pay you back." Her confident demeanor was gone, replaced by desperation. Even after everything, she was still asking for money. I realized that to her, I was just a convenient source of financial support. "Sorry," I said, "but I'm not giving you a single cent. I can't trust people like you to pay me back." Take responsibility for your own choices. Please, don't say that. You have the inheritance from your late husband, surely you can help us. No, I replied firmly, handle your own problems, I'm done. My daughter-in-law looked down, clearly disappointed, but she seemed to understand that I wouldn't change my mind. She didn't ask for money again. After that, my contact with my eldest son and his wife faded. They stopped visiting and hardly ever reached out, but surprisingly, I didn't feel lonely. Instead, I felt a sense of relief, free from the people who had tried to deceive me. Eventually, my eldest child and daughter-in-law moved away. According to my neighbors, some rather shady people took them, likely due to their unpaid debts. They were probably taken to a far-off place, facing consequences they can't escape now. Whatever hardships they might be going through are no longer my concern. Our ties are completely severed. I looked at my late husband's photo and shared the end of this chaotic chapter with him. He seemed almost relieved in the picture, as if he knew everything was finally resolved. Now, my only family is my late husband. He was the one who always stood by me and truly cared for me. Life is short, and I want to live it with strength, treasuring the memories we shared.
Hello, I'm Patricia, 48 years old, and I live with my husband Ethan and my mother-in-law in a well-connected suburb close to the train station, which provides excellent access to the city center. During our house hunting phase, Ethan, who had just been promoted to a managerial position, insisted on finding a spacious apartment, even though it came with a high rent. He believed the extra space was worth the cost. Ethan is 6 years older than me and was introduced to me by a mutual friend after his divorce. His mature, comforting presence quickly became something I relied on. After 3 years of dating, we decided to get married. When I revealed my struggles with infertility due to a past illness, his affection remained unwavering. My feelings for him only grew stronger, even after learning about his previous marriage and his son Willie from that relationship. I'm truly sorry to ask you to live with my parents and son, Ethan had said. I promise I won't let you suffer. I'll ensure you're happy and give you space so you don't feel suffocated. He suggested moving into a large apartment where I could have my own room. Willie turning 9 that year wouldn't require much care, especially with his grandmother around to help. After his divorce, Ethan's parents had supported him with childcare till his father tragically passed away in an accident, leaving his mother to take over as Willie's caretaker. From our very first meeting, Willie barely made eye contact with me. Initially, I attributed his reserved demeanor to his age and possible shyness, so I didn't let it bother me too much. As long as the family accepted me, I felt content to be part of their household. My mother-in-law, a woman of quiet elegance, treated me with kindness during our formal introduction post-engagement, which gave me hope that we could coexist peacefully. She set clear expectations from the start. I'll continue to prepare the meals as usual. Ethan often comes home late, so it's fine if we eat at different times, right, Patricia? I'll leave the cleaning and laundry to you. Let's work well together, she said. After we married, I transitioned from full-time to part-time work at the pharmacy to better manage the household chores. This new schedule meant I wouldn't get home until nearly 9:05 p.m., but at least dinner was always ready, a small comfort during my solo dining routine. My mother-in-law and Willie typically ate before I arrived, which reinforced a sense of isolation even within my married life. At first, I wondered if this was all there was to family life, but I gradually accepted it as our way. Despite our seemingly smooth start, it became evident that my mother-in-law never truly accepted me or considered me part of the family. In my attempts to bond with Willie, I asked about his school activities. Willie, when is the school's activity day before summer? We're all going to see you, aren't we? Before he could answer, my mother-in-law quickly intervened, saying, We'll go, just Ethan and me. Patricia, you don't need to worry about it. Misunderstanding her intentions, I persisted, I can take the day off work. Let's all go together. But she dismissed me sharply. You don't need to do that. Your Ethan's wife and family has always just been Ethan and me. Her words stunned me. That night, I expressed my shock to Ethan, who explained, Mom has been clinging to Willie. She probably thinks you're trying to take him away. I'll talk to her about it over time. I managed to attend the activity day, hoping to integrate into the family as a mother figure. However, Willie and I rarely interacted outside of these school events. Sometimes I sensed he wanted to open up, but my mother-in-law consistently interjected, blocking any progress. I later discovered she had been tarnishing my image in Willie's eyes, suggesting that I would be happier if he weren't in the picture. This revelation deeply hurt me, highlighting the complexities and challenges of blending into a family with pre-existing bonds and hidden resentments. The accusations were harsh. She's a terrible person. Dad must be deceived by her too. Hearing such negative comments from my mother-in-law must have influenced Willie during his impressionable teenage years, explaining why he grew distant from me. The situation was disheartening. I had never imagined she could be so manipulative. By the time Willie graduated from high school, he was eager to leave home. He moved in with his girlfriend immediately and departed for college soon after. Within a year of starting his career, he married her quietly and simply, without any formal ceremony. Once Willie was gone, my mother-in-law's behavior took a turn for the worse. Surprisingly, she stopped all housework, which had been a regular part of her daily routine. It seemed her new pastime was finding fault with me. She stopped cooking, something she had previously taken pride in, and would sit at the dining table waiting for me to return from work. The moment I stepped into the kitchen to prepare a meal, the criticisms began. "You're so inefficient. At this rate, it'll take you all night," she scoffed. I admitted I wasn't skilled at cooking, mainly because I had relied on her for meals. Whenever I did manage to cook, she critiqued every dish relentlessly. "This tastes awful," she would say, grimacing. "I'm sorry. I'm trying my best," I would respond, only to hear her retort, "You're astonishingly tone deaf when it comes to flavors, Patricia. It's a good thing Willie never had to eat this." If she disliked it so much, I thought, why didn't she just cook herself? It seemed her goal was merely to berate me. Her complaints weren't limited to my cooking. She began to nitpick everything I did, from chores I wasn't accustomed to handling to laundry. "Why are there so many wrinkles in the laundry? You have to vacuum every nook and cranny. You really can't do anything right. Didn't your family teach you anything?" These jabs at my upbringing were especially painful. She would sigh disdainfully and say, "I don't know how you won over Ethan, but I can't see much charm in you as a woman." She always concluded with the same hurtful line, "If you hadn't come along, Willie would have never left." I realized her heart was aching from Willie's absence. Perhaps it was a case of empty nest syndrome. I told myself that if venting her frustrations on me helped her cope, I should just bear it. However, her antagonism intensified after a particular event. The announcement of Willie's wife, Teresa, being pregnant. The joy she displayed was unlike anything I had seen before. "It's Will's baby. It's bound to be adorable. He'll be my first grandchild," she exclaimed with genuine happiness, watching their elation. Despite the ongoing challenges at home, I found a small piece of joy for myself. My mother-in-law's excitement over the impending arrival of her great-grandchild was nothing short of overwhelming. The catalyst for her exuberance came when Willie asked if his wife, Teresa, could have their baby at our place, given that her family lived an hour away and they lacked local support. Thrilled to be needed, my mother-in-law immediately agreed to help. Joy palpable. Willie's calls became a daily occurrence, each one sending her excitement soaring even higher. She dove into preparations with fervor, clearing out Willie's old room, organizing the space for the baby, and meticulously planning everything from nursery decor to essential baby supplies. The moment I got home from work, she enlisted my help. "Patricia, I've taken care of the vacuuming in Willie's room. Could you handle wiping down the floors and the windows? And make sure to wax them too," she instructed, her tone urgent. "This weekend, we're off to buy a crib," she added, as if it were the most natural plan for our weekend. Juggling these tasks late into the night after my shifts was grueling, and any attempt to shortcut the process was met with a stern command to start over. Before long, her requests extended to finances. "Patricia, I need you to withdraw some money tomorrow. There are a few more things I want to pick up for the baby," she declared one morning. I hesitated, concerned by the rapid pace of spending. Shouldn't we wait for Teresa and Willie to arrive before we buy so much? Maybe Teresa would like to choose some things herself, I suggested, hoping to inject some practicality into the frenzy. Her response was sharp and dismissive. "How can you be so detached? It's Ethan's grandchild, after all. Oh, but of course, you're not related by blood. You wouldn't understand, would you?" The accusation stung, and I tried to clarify my position gently. "It's not that I don't care. I just thought it might be nice for Teresa to have a say in her own child's preparations," I explained. but my attempt to reason with her seemed to hit a nerve. She shot me a piercing glare, and I realized I may have crossed the line. I watched helplessly as she turned and retreated to her room, deeply upset. That night, I reflected on our harsh exchange, feeling the weight of her words. The following morning, she stayed in her room, likely still angry about our conversation. Ethan was about to leave on a business trip when he paused at her door to make a final remark. "I'm heading out. Don't dampen Mom's enthusiasm about the grandchild. She's been different since Willie moved out. You've noticed it too, right?" I nodded but added, "However, if we use up all our funds now, what will we do when Willie and Teresa need our help?" Ethan frowned, misunderstanding my concern. "Are you suggesting I don't make enough money?" Ethan said, but I quickly reassured him, "That's not it at all." However, it was too late. He left visibly upset, leaving me alone to ponder the delicate balance of family dynamics and financial responsibility. As the one managing our household finances for over 12 years, I considered it prudent to think ahead. Ethan had always reassured me that my part-time income was for my own use, so I diligently saved whatever I didn't spend, viewing it as a shared resource for our future. However, the financial stability of our household had been steadily deteriorating over the past 4 years. Ethan's salary had shrunk to a third of what it was when we first got married, due to his company's declining performance. Despite the uncertainty about the company's future and his job security until retirement, Ethan was reluctant to seek new employment, unwilling to relinquish his role as department head, primarily to maintain appearances in front of my mother-in-law. As a result, I took on the responsibility of paying our rent while he managed other living expenses. We kept this arrangement hidden from my mother-in-law to preserve Ethan's dignity. One day, feeling the weight of recent tensions, I decided to leave work early to apologize to my mother-in-law. When I arrived home, she was already seated at the dining table, waiting for me. "I'm sorry about yesterday. I may have been too harsh," I began, but she interrupted me with an icy demeanor. "Willie and Teresa are coming back to have their baby here. I need you to move out," she stated bluntly. Stunned, I barely managed to ask, "I have to leave?" She confirmed, "Yes, we don't need another mother figure. You've been redundant for a while now. Willie and his family will be living here. Make sure you're out by tomorrow." Her words hit me like a freight train. I had never felt fully accepted by the family. I had always been the outsider. Now, with Willie's return for the birth, it was clear I was a failure. "You were allowed to experience raising a child. Be grateful for that. We have no obligation to support you anymore. It seems Ethan is tired of you too. Maybe he's getting along well with a new girlfriend by now." Shocked and heartbroken, I grabbed my bag and left the house, wandering aimlessly to calm my shaken spirit. I tried calling Ethan, but despite my mother-in-law's insinuations, he didn't answer, no matter how many times I dialed. I even called his office, only to find out he had taken a few days off. The suspicions seeded by my mother-in-law started to seem more plausible. Overwhelmed with emotion and tears streaming down my face, I found myself in front of the pub near the station, a place Ethan and I used to frequent when we first moved here. It still stood as a relic of happier times. As I entered, the owner's face clouded with concern before he recognized me. "Hey, long time no see." "It's been about 6 years," I replied, trying to muster a smile despite my distress. "Yes, it's been a while. I remember you," he said, offering a nod of recognition that brought a brief sense of relief. "Can I get a beer and a mixed plate of charbroiled chicken?" I asked for a small comfort in this familiar place, a refuge from the storm swirling through my life. As I settled into the pub, I engaged in light conversation with the owner, a man of few words, while sipping my cold beer and savoring the charbroiled chicken. Pulling out my cell phone, I lit up the screen to reveal a photo of Ethan and me taken on Willie's 17th birthday. He looked dashing in the slim suit we had chosen together, and I found myself wishing for a closer family bond. The beer seemed to wash away the day's troubles, and as I contemplated my next steps, I browsed for moving companies, discovering one available for the next day. I bookmarked a couple of junk removal services, saving their contacts in my favorites, and changed my screensaver to something less personal. A sense of mental clarity began to return, and the meal tasted exceptionally good. Perhaps a small comfort amid the chaos. I decided to give the situation more thought once I was back home. As I walked away from the pub, a young waitress hurried towards me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Patricia?" she asked. Having noted my previous screensaver, she hesitated, then dropped a bombshell. She believed my husband was having an affair with one of their employees. We exchanged contact details, and she promised to keep me updated. Suddenly, the pieces began to fit together, validating the harsh words of my mother-in-law. Instead of feeling sad, a fierce anger surged within me. It was time to confront this head-on. That evening, I contacted the moving company and resolved to leave the next day. If there was no conspiracy and my mother-in-law and Willie were indeed plotting against me, I no longer felt obliged to maintain appearances. I packed my belongings relentlessly until midnight. The movers arrived promptly the next morning, and I instructed them to take everything I had purchased. I was determined to erase any trace of my presence. My mother-in-law was taken aback by my resolve. "I'm taking everything I bought. You can start fresh tomorrow," I declared. "I'm taking everything I bought," I declared, barely suppressing a laugh at her protests. The movers efficiently cleared out my belongings, leaving behind only the baby gear and her old dresser, the remnants of a life before I arrived. "Well then, I bid you farewell. There shouldn't be a trace of me left, so enjoy your new life with Ethan, Willie, and his family," I said coolly, leaving her stunned as I placed the keys on the table and exited the house, the movers trailing behind with my possessions. I decided to stay with a colleague temporarily, feeling a sense of completion and relief wash over me. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in months. 2 weeks later, Ethan finally reached out, his voice tinged with confusion and urgency. "Patricia, where are you? Willie and his family are here. Aren't you coming home soon?" "No, I'm not coming back," I replied firmly, recalling his mother's command for me to leave. Meanwhile, the young waitress from the pub had kept her promise, sending me a photo of Ethan chatting intimately with another woman at the pub and later entering a hotel with her. This betrayal erased any remaining affection I had for him. Armed with evidence of the affair, I was ready to confront the situation fully. No longer bound by illusions of my old life, I had had enough. I didn't hesitate to make it clear to Ethan over the phone. "Willie and his family are moving in with you, right?" I figured as much. I heard they'd been struggling financially, bouncing between part-time jobs since Willie graduated from vocational school. "I want you back, Patricia," Ethan replied, desperation lacing his voice. "I went to the pharmacy and they said you were taking some time off." "Yeah, I needed a break," I said nonchalantly. "But I'm fine, so don't worry about me. Your mom and Willie probably prefer having the house to themselves without me around." My blunt remark left Ethan speechless. He knew all too well that his mother and Willie had never accepted me, but he chose to ignore it. "All right, I need to talk, so I'll come back there," he said, a plea evident in his tone. A few days later, I returned to the house for the first time since leaving. Inside, I noticed new furniture and appliances. Willie and Teresa barely acknowledged my presence, nodding from their seats on the sofa without standing. As I sat down, my mother-in-law glared at me with a mix of shock and disdain, the atmosphere thick with tension. Before I could rush my visit and leave, Willie confronted me. "What are you doing here? You took everything from the house. What kind of monster does that? Dad's been supporting you and you've had it easy." I exhaled deeply, frustration boiling over. "I took everything because I paid for it. I was clearing out all traces of myself, just as you all wanted, right? That's crazy. There's no way you could afford all that just working part-time at the pharmacy," Willie shot back. Turning to face Ethan, I replied firmly, "We've been getting by on what both Ethan and I earn. And for your information, Ethan's company hasn't been doing well. His salary has dropped significantly. For the past 4 years, I've been the one covering the shortfall. I've been paying our rent." My mother-in-law's face registered shock as she turned to look at Ethan, who awkwardly avoided her gaze. "I'm not just a part-timer. I'm a druggist, and the pay is quite good. I make more than Ethan now." The room went silent, the tension palpable. I turned to Willie. I decided it was time to face some hard truths. "Since you're going to live here now, it's time for you to start taking responsibility. You'll be paying the rent to help your grandmother." Willie's face twisted in surprise. "Rent? How much is it?" "It's $7,200, I stated firmly. "Good luck, because it seems my role here is over. I have no obligation to take care of you anymore. You're going to be a father soon, Willie. It's time to pull yourself together." Teresa, overhearing our conversation, suddenly spoke up, panic evident in her voice. "Wait, $7,200? Weren't we supposed to live here for free?" I stood up ready to leave, satisfied that I had made my point clear. Covering rent and living expenses is just part of life. Good luck figuring it out. As I walked out, leaving them to absorb this new reality, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The chapter of my life filled with neglect and ingratitude was finally closing. I almost burst out laughing at the absurdity of the situation but managed to keep my composure. Don't worry, Teresa. There are cheaper places available. Ethan still makes a decent salary after all, I remarked, watching her face relax slightly. Then, with a heavy dose of sarcasm, I added, "Oh, and since I'll be leaving, life might get tough for you, Ethan, especially with your mistress." At that, Teresa's composure shattered, and she dissolved into tears. "What are you talking about?" my husband stammered, looking panicked. Through her tears, Teresa responded, "Oh, your mother told me about the new woman. I guess it's time to end my role as a wife too." Ethan looked flustered. "My mother said what?" he sputtered, realizing too late that I knew far more than he wished I did. "It hasn't even been 6 days since I left the house." "Ethan, wouldn't that hurt Grace if she knew?" I mused aloud. At the mention of Grace's name, Ethan's face went pale, confirming my suspicions. "This isn't the right atmosphere to discuss divorce papers, but I'll be in touch about that later," I declared, standing up to leave. Neither Ethan nor Willie could find the words to respond. They remained silent as I grabbed my bag. However, my mother-in-law abruptly stood up, slamming her hands on the table and yelling with surprising vigor for her age, "What the hell? It's all your fault. Our home is in shambles." I shot back without hesitation. "It was you who told me to leave, you who hinted at Ethan's affair, and you who interfered with my relationship with Willie. Everything is because of you." A rush of anger surged through me, and I regretted not being more assertive in my relationship with Willie and not standing up to her sooner. "Willie has nothing to do with this, Ethan. It's time for you to step up. You're going through a hard time. You should support him as his wife and take responsibility as a family member," I admonished. "What is she even talking about?" my mother-in-law muttered, bewildered. If she hadn't called Willie back home, if she hadn't hinted at Ethan's affair, I would still be supporting Ethan in this home. "Where are you, Willie? Why are you still here?" "It's all her fault," my mother-in-law concluded, her lips pressed tightly together, trembling with emotion. I slipped past her and quickly left the room. Afterward, Ethan agreed to the divorce rather easily. My determination and the undeniable evidence of the affair left him no other choice. Shortly after, it seemed they began the process of moving out of the apartment. In the end, Willie and Teresa returned to their own apartment, opting not to live with my mother-in-law. Ethan appeared to be considering remarriage, but Grace was furious over the alimony and his request for her to live with his mother. I heard they were now deliberating their next steps after everything that transpired. My mother-in-law eventually ended up in a care facility. It's somewhat melancholy to reflect on the irony of her situation. After all the dedication she poured into raising her son and caring for her grandson, it seems they are now ready to move on without her. Perhaps, in their eyes, she had fulfilled her role. If my mother-in-law had held her tongue back then, and if it had merely been a simple return home for childbirth, maybe we could have continued living together even after the divorce. But things unfolded differently. Willie sent me an apology letter recently. In it, he expressed his childhood longing for more affection and explained that he couldn't talk to me freely because his grandmother disapproved. He also shared how pleased he was whenever I attended his school events. Reading his words, I wondered if I should have made more effort to connect with him. Maybe then our relationship could have taken a different path. Despite the end of our familial ties, I find myself silently hoping for Willie's happiness in life. As for me, I've returned to my job as a druggist and rented an apartment close to my workplace. I didn't feel right keeping the furniture and appliances I had taken from the house, so I arranged for a junk removal service to take them away. Life without the constant criticism and interference of my mother-in-law has turned out to be peaceful and comfortable. For now, I am focused on living for my own happiness, no longer beholden to fulfilling someone else's expectations or desires. It's a new chapter, one where I can finally breathe freely and look forward to what comes next. Hi, I'm Camilla, 30 years old, and I've been married to Patrick for 3 years. We don't have children yet. Our lives took a significant turn after the sudden passing of Patrick's father, Jesse. At the time, we were living in another state, and the news of Jess's unexpected heart attack hit us hard. During the funeral, Patrick's uncle subtly suggested that as the youngest and only son, Patrick should return home to be closer to family and support his mother. A few months later, Patrick told me that he had arranged a job transfer to be closer to his family home. He made the decision on his own and only informed me afterward, which really upset me. A decision that big should have involved both of us. When I confronted him, Patrick apologized, explaining that he had expected me to resist the idea. He knew that I didn't get along well with his mother, Mary, a feeling that was mutual. When we lived farther away, our visits to his parents were mostly limited to extended holidays, partly due to our work schedules. Mary often complained about how infrequent our visits were, comparing us to Patrick's sisters Amanda and Diane, who lived nearby and visited frequently. Patrick always defended our situation, but the tension between Mary and me was never far from the surface. One of Mary's main issues with me was our lack of children. During a summer visit, she once openly questioned why we didn't have any yet, going so far as to compare me unfavorably to her daughters, who also didn't have kids. Her outdated views and intrusive comments about motherhood always grated on me. Still, when Mary's health began to decline, even Patrick grew more concerned, which played a big role in our recent decision to move closer to her. With Patrick now back home and me having quit my job, I dreaded the increased interaction with Mary. I even considered letting Patrick move back on his own, especially after hearing a friend's horror story about her husband's infidelity during a business trip. But after much thought, I decided to move with him. After all, we wouldn't be living with his mother full-time. Surprisingly, Mary seemed genuinely pleased with my decision. 3 weeks later, Mary invited me over for tea, something I had never accepted before. Reluctantly, I agreed. When I arrived at my in-laws' house, Mary and Amanda were both there to greet me. Amanda wasted no time with her snark. "Pamela, it's been so long. Why haven't you visited since moving here?" she asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Internally, I was already regretting coming. Mary, however, seemed oddly cheerful. "I was so happy when you decided to move closer," she said. "But it seems I was wrong. You don't like me, do you?" For a brief moment, I was tempted to confirm her suspicion just to see her reaction, but I held my tongue. "I don't dislike you, Mary," I said, forcing a polite smile. "I've just been feeling unwell, adjusting to the move. The new environment has been tiring," I explained, which was partly true. I'd been resting at home due to fatigue, and Patrick hadn't even mentioned this visit. Why was I here today, only to endure their harsh words? Mary quickly accused me of disliking her. But wasn't it the other way around? How were we supposed to get along under these conditions? Amanda cut in sharply. "How can you speak to your mother-in-law like that? Apologize to her. Say you're sorry." I braced myself for Mary's anger, but her response caught me off guard. "You're right," she said, her voice unexpectedly soft. "I have been mean. I'm sorry, Pamela. And I'm also sorry about the comments I made about children. I was being nosy." I was stunned. I had expected a lecture, perhaps some hidden sarcasm, but there was none. Even Amanda looked surprised. "All I ever wanted was to hold a grandchild," Mary confessed quietly. She went on to explain that Amanda's husband was infertile, and Diane seemed to be having fertility issues as well. So she had placed her hopes on Patrick and me. Even though I knew about Amanda and Diane's struggles, Patrick and I had our own conversations about children. We were considering it, but it wasn't a decision to be rushed. "Please just give us some time," I replied, bowing my head slightly. Despite everything, I still felt a sense of duty. "I'm sorry," I added, "but do visit us sometime." With that, the tension seemed to dissolve. Mary and Amanda resumed watching TV, sipping their tea as if nothing had happened. "I like this announcer," Mary remarked about a local TV personality. "She's so energetic and bright." Watching them together, I felt a pang of regret. Maybe if I had been more outgoing, things could have been different with Mary and her family. It was a fleeting, somewhat naive thought, but I was relieved to have expressed my feelings earlier. Maybe this could lead to a better relationship between us, I hoped. But that hope didn't last long. Later that evening, Patrick came home, visibly upset. "Mom told me you said you have no intention of getting along," he said, his voice laced with anger. "She was crying, Pamela. What did you say to her?" I was taken aback. Just a few hours ago, he had left with a smile, and now he was accusing me of something completely different. "Patrick, there's been a misunderstanding," I began, trying to stay calm. I told her it's difficult for me to be friends with her given how things have been between us. But I never said I didn't want to get along. He didn't seem convinced. His earlier smile now felt like a distant memory, replaced by doubt. I felt a wave of fear. He fully believed Mary's twisted version of the story. I tried to explain further, but he wasn't listening. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Amanda. After all the effort of moving here, weren't you prepared to make it work? If you're here with us, you need to be a bit more patient. Patrick glanced at me, his expression mirroring Amanda's words. I suddenly felt very alone. I moved here because I wanted to be with Patrick, not to appease Mary and Amanda. I looked him in the eye and said, "It's clear that Mary and the others might never approve of me. Maybe you should consider someone she likes more." The word divorce slipped out before I could stop it, and for the first time, Patrick looked genuinely alarmed. "Wait, hold on. How did we jump to divorce?" he asked, bewildered by the sudden turn. "I just want you to get along better with my family." He couldn't seem to grasp that his family might never truly accept me, which left me feeling equally baffled. But Patrick seemed determined to resolve the misunderstanding. The next day, he came home late from work and told me about his conversation with his mother. She had admitted that there was a misunderstanding and even apologized. "What a fuss," Patrick said, as if it were all behind us. Then, as if on a completely different note, he mentioned that Mary's birthday was coming up. How about we celebrate her birthday at a fancy restaurant? The sudden shift from turmoil to talks of a birthday celebration left me confused. But it was clear that Patrick was making an effort to mend things, even if the path forward seemed rocky. Patrick suggested that if we framed the birthday dinner as my idea, it might help shift Mary's perception of me in a positive direction. I was skeptical, given Mary's complex personality, but I agreed to make the reservation. I invited Amanda and the rest of the family, booking a table for 8. Patrick was on board, but as the day approached, an uneasy feeling grew inside me. Patrick had been distant lately, his responses to my attempts at conversation curt and indifferent. I felt more isolated with each passing day. The night of the dinner arrived, and we walked into the restaurant to find Mary, Amanda, and their spouses already seated. The host showed Patrick and me to our table, casting a curious glance in our direction, adding to my discomfort. "Happy birthday, Mary," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I greeted Mary cheerfully, trying to bridge the gap. However, she didn't even acknowledge me, instead turning to the others and thanking them for joining her celebration. It felt like a deliberate snub. Amanda glanced at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "I thought today was a family gathering," she remarked, her brief, puzzled look leaving me uneasy. Diane, sensing the tension, glanced over with concern, making it clear that I was being deliberately excluded. Determined not to let it ruin my evening, I decided to quietly keep to myself and leave early. But just as I settled on this plan, a staff member approached our table with a slightly awkward expression. "I'm sorry, but the reservation was actually made for 7 people tonight," he informed us. Confused, I responded, "I distinctly remember reserving for 8. Could there be a mistake?" "No. It was definitely changed to 7, the staff member replied, recalling my original reservation. But about a week ago, we received a call from a gentleman asking to reduce the number. Stunned, I turned to Patrick for an explanation. His response floored me. "Yes, service for 7 is fine. Everyone's here now," he stated plainly, confirming that he had made the change himself. In that moment, I felt a wave of betrayal and disbelief. Patrick's actions made it clear that despite his claims of wanting to smooth things over, his commitment was superficial at best. The realization that he had manipulated the situation without telling me cast a dark shadow over what was supposed to be a festive family gathering. I stood there, stunned. Patrick turned to me with a glare, and I braced myself. "I heard from Mom that you've been undermining our family, saying I don't earn enough, and that I'm insensitive. You had a lot to say, huh?" It turned out that a week ago, when Patrick contacted Mary about the dinner reservation, she had filled his ears with all sorts of falsehoods. Blinded by anger and believing her without question, he had called the restaurant, pretending to be me, and reduced the reservation from 8 to 7. Since the staff recognized the family name, they didn't question the change. I couldn't believe how easily Patrick had been misled. The realization hit hard. His loyalty had wavered, and it seemed like I was the only one trying to salvage something real in this tangled web of family drama. I questioned my presence there as frustration boiled over. When I confronted Patrick, demanding that he apologize to everyone and reflect on his actions. He did something unexpected. He insisted that I should apologize to my in-laws and go home alone to think things over. Naturally, I refused. I couldn't apologize for things I hadn't said, nor did I need a husband who took his mother's word over mine. Tears of frustration welled up in my eyes. Why had I even followed him here? Seeing my distress, Patrick began to panic, but it was too late. Mary, observing the scene, wore a smug smile, clearly pleased with the chaos she had stirred. I spoke coldly to Patrick. Next time, marry a younger, more docile daughter-in-law. Maybe then you'll have the children and happiness you want. Mary's response came sharp and cutting. Pamela, why don't you go back to your parents' house? A daughter-in-law is ultimately an outsider. I can't see you as part of this family. You're not charming at all, so please leave, quickly. Her words stung, but they also solidified my resolve. I didn't need to be told twice. I'm leaving, with or without your approval. Good luck finding someone who can actually get along with someone as twisted as you, I retorted, turning on my heel to walk out of the restaurant. Patrick stayed silent, his head buried in his hands. As I neared the exit, I heard someone calling my name. It was Diane and her husband. Pamela, wait, Diane called out, her voice strained with distress. I can't stand it anymore. Mom and Amanda, they haven't changed at all. I knew the gossip about you was false. Her words, a rare acknowledgement of truth amidst all the chaos, gave me a flicker of solace. Diane continued, making it clear that she was ready to cut ties with the toxic environment. It was a small gesture of solidarity, but in that moment, it was something I desperately needed. As I stood there, processing her words, my phone buzzed. Mary's name flashed on the screen, and I sighed. What now? But before I could answer, Patrick's name appeared instead. Muttering under my breath, I glanced at Diane and her husband, who exchanged knowing looks. Pamela, you might want to go back to the restaurant, Diane said, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. You might see something interesting. They left, looking oddly pleased with themselves. I hesitated, but curiosity tugged at me, overpowering my desire to distance myself from the drama. Reluctantly, I turned back toward the restaurant, wondering what twist lay ahead. When I finally answered Patrick's frantic call, his voice was laced with panic. Pamela, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was all a lie. I'll send the divorce papers later, he blurted out, but then quickly added, almost pleading, wait, can't you come back? Please, it's a lifetime request. His almost childish plea might have made me laugh if not for Diane's cryptic hint lingering in my mind. Against my better judgment, I decided to return to the restaurant. When I arrived, I was met with an unexpected scene. A crowd had gathered around Patrick's table where a local TV announcer, Mary's favorite, was speaking into a microphone. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Mary was stumbling over her words, clearly flustered as she tried to explain herself. No, that's not it. It's a misunderstanding, she stammered. Patrick and Amanda sat awkwardly, looking completely unprepared for the spectacle unfolding before them. The announcer, relentless, pressed Mary further. You loudly declared that Pamela is an outsider and should leave. Could you explain what you meant by that in detail? Meanwhile, Diane's husband, along with others who had been offended earlier, had quietly slipped away from the scene. I stood there, dumbfounded, as I pieced together that this had somehow turned into a public spectacle, and judging by the cameras, it was possibly being broadcasted live. A staff member approached, noticing my confusion. It's been quite a day, hasn't it? They remarked, explaining that a TV recording had been scheduled at the restaurant that day, which explained the unexpected media presence. The entire family drama had accidentally played out on live television, exposing everything to the public in stark, unfiltered detail. I stood there, processing the whirlwind of events, feeling a strange mix of disbelief and vindication. This bizarre turn of events had unfolded in such a way that the truth was now out for everyone to see. The private dining area hadn't been as secluded as they thought, and conversations had been easily overheard. Just as I was about to step outside for air, a famous TV announcer approached Mary, beaming. Mary, would you be willing to do an interview? He asked cheerfully. Mary, always an avid fan of the media, lit up with excitement. An interview? Absolutely, she exclaimed, eager to soak in the attention. The announcer smiled. We're talking about mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationships today. We heard there was a bit of a heated argument earlier, and the daughter-in-law left in tears. "Can you tell us what happened?" Mary's face went pale at the unexpected question. Amanda's expression mirrored her mother's as they both struggled to come up with a response. Their manipulation and scheming had now been laid bare, and they were cornered into explaining the truth. Just then, from across the room, Patrick spotted me. He looked desperate, his eyes pleading. "Pamela, please," he called out. But by now, his words were nothing more than noise against the backdrop of the chaos that had unfolded. "I can't let this shame be known. It was all a misunderstanding," Patrick implored, looking utterly defeated. But by then, any feelings I had for him had evaporated. Mary, attempting to smooth things over, forced a strange smile. "Oh, we usually call each other Pamela," she said, trying to paint a picture of familiarity. "Pamela, come over here," she beckoned, her voice unnervingly sweet. As I approached, the announcer directed the microphone toward me. "You say you call each other Pamela, but how does the daughter-in-law truly view her mother-in-law?" they asked. Calmly, I responded, "I've never been called that." I paused. "I have, however, been called unpatriotic for not having children. Multiple times. Patrick and I haven't felt ready or confident enough to start a family. We haven't even tried in over 2 years, and I've been repeatedly told that's grounds for divorce." I continued, sharing how Patrick had initially supported me when I first fell ill and had to take a leave from work. I appreciated his kindness and followed him here, thinking a change of environment might help. "But this," I said, gesturing to the scene around me, "is the result." By then, my tears had dried up, leaving only detachment. Seeing Mary and Amanda squirm with embarrassment brought a small flicker of satisfaction. As I stood there, fully aware this could all be broadcast nationwide, I couldn't help but reflect on the surreal nature of the day. Watching Mary's distressed expression when I mentioned the broadcast made me smile. "Well, since I'm considered an outsider, I suppose I should leave. Goodbye," I said, savoring the moment as I turned to exit the restaurant. I ignored the shouts and commotion that followed, feeling a wave of relief as I walked away. The day had been long and fraught with emotion, but in that final moment, I felt a profound release. Walking away from that chaotic scene, a mix of relief and satisfaction settled in. Although Mary and her family managed to prevent the footage from airing, the incident caused a local stir, becoming a hot topic among relatives and acquaintances. The gossip spread quickly, fueling endless speculation. I returned home, packed my belongings, and moved back to my parents' house. I sent Patrick the divorce papers, but his response was delayed, prompting me to consider involving a lawyer. To my surprise, Patrick soon appeared at my parents' doorstep. My father, Peter, usually a composed and calm man, took charge of the situation with a firm hand. Patrick, clearly remorseful, offered a heartfelt apology. He claimed he would sever ties with his family and promised to trust only me going forward. But his words felt hollow, too little, too late. Visibly upset by the years of distress Patrick had caused, my father didn't mince words. "Why didn't you realize this sooner? What have you put Pamela through all these years? Just sign the divorce papers and leave," he instructed sternly. With regret etched across his face, Patrick handed over the papers. His handwriting was shaky, barely legible. Despite the difficulty, the divorce was processed smoothly. It later emerged that Amanda had been the true cause of her infertility, a fact she had wrongly blamed on her husband. Now on the brink of her own divorce, she no longer visited her in-laws. Patrick returned to live with his mother, Mary, in their small hometown, likely facing the weight of uncomfortable rumors. But that chapter of my life was closed. In the months that followed, life took a more positive turn. I reconnected with a classmate from my hometown, and we eventually married. Our relationship is filled with joy, and we soon welcomed a child. We now have a 2-year-old daughter, and I am expecting our second child. My new mother-in-law is a blessing, supportive, kind, and everything Mary was not. Life is unpredictable, but in this moment, I am living a fulfilling and happy life surrounded by the love and support I once thought was out of reach. Hello, I'm Bella, and at 31 years old, I'm currently managing our household while staying at home. My husband, Jerry, who is 4 years older than me, and I have been living with his parents, Henry and Marilyn, for the past 3 years. Both in their 60s, Henry and Marilyn are surprisingly vigorous and healthy. Marilyn, in particular, is very sociable and enjoys a busy social life. Since moving in, I've noticed that Marilyn rarely contributes to household chores despite not having a job outside the home. Although she was once a stay-at-home mom, she now leaves most of the domestic responsibilities to me. Occasionally, she encourages me to take some time for myself, but then criticizes me if things aren't perfect when she returns. I've tried discussing my concerns with her, explaining that I might not be able to complete all the tasks before she leaves, but she often brushes me off. She insists that managing numerous chores is normal and tends to criticize my generation for not being as capable as hers. Furthermore, Marilyn frequently praises Jerry, particularly proud of his position at a prominent company, and often suggests that I don't measure up. This comparison has become her go-to comment. Jerry's reactions only make things worse. During meals, when Marilyn complains about my efforts, he responds with an indifferent, "Oh, really?" showing little support. I initially admired Jerry's maturity, but now I often feel like I'm just a housekeeper, despite working tirelessly into the night. The situation has grown increasingly challenging, and I wish Jerry would stand up for me. He seems oblivious to the extent of my contributions to our home. Instead of addressing my concerns directly, he tosses laundry at me, sometimes aiming for my face, curtly telling me to handle that too. I often regret marrying him because he has changed so much since our wedding. On our first anniversary, he surprised me with a cake but then playfully smashed a pie in my face, laughing about it. It's hard to believe he's an adult. However, there is one silver lining in my life: my father-in-law, Henry. He's incredibly calm and consistently checks in to see if I need help with anything. He's become the only source of kindness I experience in this household. Since leaving my job to marry Jerry, Henry has become someone I can confide in, and my affection for him has grown. I see him almost as a real father. Unfortunately, Henry works during the day, which means I often find myself alone with Marilyn. While I can speak freely with Henry, Marilyn's demeanor toward me can be quite sour. She has even begun accusing me of flirting with my father-in-law simply because Jerry neglects me. She hurls these accusations when Henry is out of earshot. I've tried to deny it, but she dismisses my words with a mocking tone, asking if she's touched a nerve and always ready with a biting retort. Our conversations seem to go nowhere. I brought these issues up with Jerry, hoping he would understand that Marilyn's suspicions are unfounded, but he just laughed it off, joking that I must now be interested in older men too. It's painfully clear that nothing will change. I never expected Jerry to start doing chores or to put an end to Marilyn's mockery, but I also didn't anticipate his reaction to the situation. It was a significant shock, leaving me feeling increasingly out of place in their home. One summer day, Marilyn began discussing plans for a family trip during Jerry's summer break. At first, I thought her excitement was just her usual enthusiasm for outings, but then she caught me off guard by asking if I wanted to join. I hadn't expected an invitation. I assumed they might leave without me. When I hesitated, Marilyn's expression turned suspicious as she questioned whether I really wanted to go. Her sudden invitation made me uneasy. I couldn't discern her motive and worried about how she might react if I declined. That evening, Jerry brought up the trip again, curious about my plans. I mentioned that I had been invited, and his reaction surprised me. He burst out laughing. Confused and feeling more uncomfortable, I asked him why he found it funny, but he brushed off my question, claiming it was nothing. On the day of the trip, it was just Jerry, Marilyn, and me in the car. Jerry was driving, with Marilyn beside him while I sat in the back. Henry was unable to join us initially due to work commitments, which added to my anxiety. Midway through our drive, Marilyn inquired if I had withdrawn money for the trip. When I confirmed that I had taken out a few hundred, her pleased reaction struck me as odd. As we continued driving, I noticed we had bypassed the inn where we were supposed to stay. "Did we just pass the inn?" I asked. Jerry responded vaguely, mentioning there was a tourist spot ahead, and that we would check in after visiting it. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and a sense of foreboding washed over me. The further we drove, the lusher and more isolated the scenery became. I let out a quiet sigh, careful not to let either Marilyn or Jerry hear my concern. Eventually, we arrived at a small, secluded dam with hardly anyone around. Marilyn suggested we get out and stretch our legs, while Jerry reminded us not to leave anything valuable in the car. I followed their instructions, stepping into the unfamiliar surroundings, still trying to make sense of the day's unexpected twists. As I got out of the car and shut the door, I noticed Marilyn and Jerry hesitating, pretending to fiddle with something inside the vehicle. Then, I heard the click of the locks engaging. The windows were left only slightly open, and suddenly Jerry burst out laughing. Confused, I asked, "What's going on? Are we staying here for the night?" A surge of anger towards Marilyn welled up within me, but I managed to keep my composure. "What do you mean?" I replied, striving to maintain my cool. "You walked right into that one, didn't you?" Jerry said, laughing so hard he had to clutch his stomach. Realization hit me like a wave. My wallet and cell phone were still in the car. Everything had unfolded exactly as Marilyn and Jerry had planned. "Have fun out here, Bella." Marilyn sneered mockingly. "Maybe you can eat some grass and sleep under the stars." Jerry, still holding my wallet, rifled through it before rolling up the window. Their laughter faded as they drove off, leaving me stranded. Standing alone, I felt the heat of humiliation wash over me, and I muttered to myself, "Well, this is just great." Despite the sweltering heat and the risk of dehydration, I surprisingly didn't panic. About an hour later, I found myself in the lobby of the inn where we were originally supposed to stay. "Why are you here?" Jerry exclaimed, shocked to see me as he entered the lobby. "Are you a ghost? Did something happen at the dam?" He looked utterly bewildered, while Marilyn appeared to be on the verge of fainting, eyeing me nervously. For a moment, I considered playing along and pretending to be a ghost just to tease them, but I decided against it. "I'm not a ghost," I said, holding up the key to my room. "I'm staying here tonight." I had already dropped off my luggage when Jerry, clearly agitated, struggled to make sense of the situation. He accused me of taking the key to their room without permission. "What are you doing?" "Give it back," he demanded, reaching aggressively for the key. This time, however, I was prepared for their antics and stood my ground, ready to confront whatever came next. Just then, a man stepped forward and firmly grasped Jerry's hand. "Sir, please refrain from causing a disturbance here," he said with authority. He was about the same age as Henry but taller and more muscular, which made him appear more commanding than my slightly overweight husband. "Who are you? Are you staff here? You can't just interfere with a guest like this. I'll sue you for assault." Marilyn shouted at the man who had intervened. "I apologize for not introducing myself earlier. I'm the owner of this inn," the man replied calmly. At this revelation, Jerry quickly released my hand. I recognized the owner immediately. I had visited this area with friends during a summer break in college. It had been an incredibly hot day, and we got lost on our way to our accommodation. During our ordeal, we stumbled upon a girl collapsed on the side of the road. Kelly, the owner's daughter. We immediately called for an ambulance and stayed with her till help arrived. The next day, the owner visited us at the inn where we were staying and thanked us profusely. "You saved my daughter's life. Thank you so much," he had said. He even extended an invitation for us to stay with him next time we were in the area, saying we wouldn't have to pay. Since then, my family and I had visited the inn several times, so I knew the owner quite well. As he addressed my husband and Marilyn, he remained polite, but I could sense an undercurrent of anger in his demeanor. In fact, both the owner and I were aware of Marilyn and Jerry's scheme from the beginning. 3 weeks ago, feeling suspicious about their sudden invitation for a trip, I had decided to set up a voice recorder in the living room. I had strategically placed the recorder to capture conversations when my husband and Marilyn thought they were alone, like when I was taking a bath or doing laundry. When I stumbled upon their plan, it was utterly shocking. I heard my husband and Marilyn plotting in a recorded conversation. "Let's ditch Bella somewhere. It would be hilarious. How about near that gym an hour's drive from the inn?" Realizing the gravity of their scheme, I immediately contacted the owner of the inn to inform him about what was unfolding. The owner was livid upon hearing this. Having once experienced his daughter collapsing from the heat, he felt a personal connection to my predicament and was even more disturbed by their callousness. He meticulously arranged my pickup for today, just after my husband and Marilyn's car departed. Interestingly, the driver of the inn shuttle turned out to be Kelly, the very girl we had helped years ago. "I got my license. Let's go for a drive," she exclaimed excitedly. Despite my initial surprise, I agreed, and we chatted happily, even stopping to buy some local specialty ice cream on the way back to the inn. Although I was aware of the plan and that a pickup was coming, I was still worried. However, Kelly, knowing the area exceptionally well, expertly navigated, and we arrived at the inn well before my husband and Marilyn. "You mentioned suing earlier, ma'am," the inn owner said, addressing Marilyn with a stern look. "Yes, I did. It's outrageous to be accused of the opposite. Marilyn snapped defiantly. I'm sorry, but you're not our guest, the owner replied firmly. What? Don't mess with us. My husband and Marilyn both lost their tempers simultaneously. Your reservations have been canceled, the owner stated plainly. And who do you think you are? My husband blustered, on the verge of another outburst. But the owner held him back. Bella did nothing wrong. We can cancel your reservations, he explained calmly. What do you mean? My husband demanded. If you leave a woman alone at a dame of the mountains after stealing her wallet, wouldn't that be a crime? The owner posed rhetorically, emphasizing the gravity of their actions. We cannot permit such behavior at our inn. He revealed that he had already called the police. My husband and Marilyn became even more incensed at this revelation. This is no joke. You can't treat us this way. I work for a respected company. My husband protested, as if his job should afford him special treatment at this quaint mountain inn. Just then, Henry arrived, immediately sensing the tension. Hey, what's going on here? He asked, surveying the scene. Marilyn and my husband quickly tried to spin the story, accusing the inn staff of rudeness and claiming they wanted to stay elsewhere. However, when Henry was briefed on the actual events, he became enraged, a sight I'd never seen before. You idiots, he yelled, clearly embarrassed. I can't believe we're from the same family. Henry exclaimed, his voice rising in anger. You two, get out of here now. My husband and mother-in-law were taken aback by Henry's outburst. Where to? They asked, bewildered. But Henry was resolute. You're disowned. Get out. No, don't make me say it again, he commanded, shoving my husband aside as the police arrived. My husband and Marilyn's faces turned ashen. The owner and I quickly explained the entire situation to the officer, even playing back the recorded conversation. As the reality of their actions sunk in, my husband and Marilyn began to cry. Henry interjected sharply, quiet down. You're disturbing the inn. He turned to the officer. Please take them away. It's not like that, officer, my husband protested. We didn't think it would be such a big deal. It was just a prank. The officer's expression hardened. A prank? Are you serious? Don't you realize that your little joke could have put someone's life at risk, especially your own wife's? They were scolded harshly, but due to the familial nature of the matter, they weren't arrested. Throughout the ordeal, my husband and Marilyn looked pale and shaken. This isn't over. Bella's feelings will determine your future, understand? With those final words, they left, visibly rattled. Henry, seeming apologetic for not intervening sooner, stayed behind to ensure everything was settled. I'm so sorry, he said repeatedly. I can't apologize enough for not noticing the unpleasant experiences you've been having and the terrible ordeal you went through today. He also offered a deep apology to the inn owner for the trouble caused by his family's actions. Interestingly, it turned out that the inn owner, who runs several other businesses, was a client of the company where Henry worked. Unaware of this connection, my husband had earlier boasted about his position at a prominent company, adding another layer of embarrassment to the situation. I was relieved that I had uncovered my husband and Marilyn's plan in time, but it was also a sobering reminder of what could have happened if I hadn't been vigilant. I hoped that being reprimanded by the police would help them understand the gravity of their actions. After returning from the inn, I decided to divorce my husband and sought a significant settlement, hoping this experience would teach them to never hurt anyone else again. In an unexpected twist, Henry and Marilyn also ended up divorcing. Henry cut all ties with my ex-husband, kicking him out of the house due to the incident. Additionally, my ex-husband was advised to resign from his job. His behavior at work had been problematic for some time, just as he had mistreated me. He had been harsh toward his colleagues and engineers. The HR department had already been considering action against him. As I reflected on my own behavior during our marriage, I was disappointed to realize that, in some ways, I had mirrored his negativity. Now unemployed, my ex-husband struggled to find another job. Despite his age, he lacked the solid track record necessary for managerial positions, and explaining his sudden departure became difficult. Marilyn, too, was kicked out by Henry and had to seek refuge with relatives, eventually returning to her parents' home. These developments underscored the consequences of their actions and the importance of integrity, both personally and professionally. Concerns lingered about Marilyn's penchant for spending and traveling, with her relatives worrying she might drain their savings if she stayed with them. Given her good health, it seemed prudent for her to secure a part-time job to support herself and ease their concerns. Meanwhile, I moved out of my in-laws' house and now live independently nearby. I've maintained a friendship with Henry and occasionally seek his advice on work-related matters. This marks the beginning of a new chapter in my life, a shift from managing household duties and raising children to embracing professional opportunities. During my job search, I was contacted by the owner of a company who had heard about my recent challenges. Concerned for my well-being, he offered me a position at his firm, eager to help me find stability. I accepted the offer with gratitude, touched by his kindness. In our conversations, he insisted that his company was the one fortunate to have me, which felt like a full circle moment, a chance to repay a past favor and now contribute positively. The company he introduced me to is well known and highly regarded for its treatment of employees, a pleasant surprise given my previous experiences. Interestingly, this company operates in the same industry my ex-husband used to boast about, yet it's significantly larger. Everyone at my new workplace has been welcoming, making my daily experiences far more enjoyable than the times marred by marital strife. This fresh start has been invigorating, allowing me to leave the past behind and look forward to a promising future. At my wedding, a situation unfolded that I could hardly believe. My in-laws, having indulged a bit too much, became the center of whispered gossip among the guests. In a surprising outburst, they confronted me, loudly proclaiming that now that I was married, if I truly wanted to belong to their family, I needed to prove my financial worth. They demanded an additional $5,000 a month, echoing sentiments my father-in-law had previously expressed. The room fell silent. I was left stunned by their audacity, feeling the color drain from my face. Thankfully, my father intervened, taking the microphone. With a firm but calm voice, he addressed them, emphasizing the embarrassment they were causing. His decisive words brought some relief to an otherwise tense moment. My name is Betty Rachel, and I'm a 33-year-old woman engaged to Stephen, a 35-year-old man I met through a friend concerned about my prolonged single status. After losing my mother at a young age, my father took on the role of both parents, working tirelessly to provide for me. This loss deeply affected me, making me guard my emotions closely, and as a result, I rarely dated seriously. Despite my initial reservations about Stephen, his persistent care and respect gradually won me over. He was always a gentleman, and over time, his unwavering support allowed me to open my heart. Dating him brought happiness back into my life, making him incredibly special to me. As my relationship with Stephen deepened, I found myself imagining a future with him, and when he proposed, it felt like the natural next step for us. Stephen had always been incredibly understanding and kind. He would constantly reassure me, saying, "Don't worry, if you ever feel unsure about something, I'll be here for you until you feel better. I love you, Betty. You can always count on me." His words warmed my heart, and I knew I wanted to offer him the same depth of care and commitment. When I shared the news of our engagement with my father, his reaction was one of overwhelming joy. He even shed tears, exclaiming, "Wow, Betty, you're finally getting married. I'm so happy for you." I playfully called him dramatic, but it led to a touching conversation where he revealed his quiet fears that I might never settle down. That moment showed me just how deeply he cared. Thanking my dad felt especially meaningful, knowing how he had raised me on his own. I anticipated that the wedding would be an emotional day for both of us, probably with more tears from him, given how emotional he was now. With our engagement set, Stephen and I began the hectic journey of wedding planning. Balancing our demanding jobs with wedding preparations meant our weekends were packed, leaving little time to rest. But we managed to keep our spirits high, excited for the special day ahead. One of the most anticipated moments was finally meeting Stephen's parents. Although Stephen had already met my father shortly after the proposal, scheduling conflicts had delayed my introduction to his parents. Finally, a visit was arranged, and as we approached their house, I was filled with both excitement and nervousness, eager to see how this meeting would go. I felt a surge of nervousness, but Stephen was quick to comfort me. "Don't worry, my parents are very kind," he assured, helping ease my anxiety as we stepped into what would be a significant new chapter in our lives. When I rang the doorbell at Stephen's family home, his mother greeted us. "Mom, I'm home," Stephen announced cheerfully. She responded with a warm smile, "Welcome home, Stephen. It's so good of you to come." As she engaged in light conversation with her son, I introduced myself politely. "Nice to meet you. My name is Betty, and I'm Stephen's fiancée." Her demeanor shifted subtly as she turned to me, her voice dropping from the cheerful tone she used with Stephen, her smile fading. "So, you're Betty," she said, giving me a long, scrutinizing look that felt more like judgment than a greeting. She led us into the living room, and her cool attitude persisted. "Betty, I'm curious. What do you bring to the table? Stephen is our treasure, our only child. If you're going to marry him, you need to be a suitable wife. Are you worthy of him?" she asked sharply, her tone more like an interrogation than a question. I was taken aback by her sudden harshness and struggled to find words. "You're joining our family, you know. Are you ready for that?" she continued, her words carrying an almost ceremonial weight, as if marrying into her family required some monumental commitment. I wasn't marrying into royalty, so why such heavy expectations? As I pondered how to respond, her patience wore thin. "When I ask you a question, you answer right away. You're so rude," she snapped, her voice rising. Despite feeling overwhelmed, I managed to respond. "I hope that Stephen and I will support each other throughout our marriage." This answer didn't satisfy her, she retorted. "What a naive thing to say. You're not just going to support each other. It's your job as his wife to support him. You don't even understand the basics," she criticized harshly. At this point, Stephen's father, who had been quietly observing, stepped in. "Honey, calm down," he interjected gently, turning to me with an apologetic smile. "Sorry about that, Betty. You must have been startled by my wife's words." His calm demeanor attempted to diffuse the tension. As I tried to remain composed, I reminded myself that Stephen's mother was fiercely protective of her only son. Perhaps her sharpness came from nerves. Just then, Stephen's brother entered the room, his quiet, gentle presence momentarily soothing the atmosphere. But that peace quickly evaporated when he, with a disarming smile, voiced his support for their mother's harsh words. "What my mother says is justified," he said. "What concerns me most is that you come from a single-parent family." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean by that?" "Being raised by just one parent doesn't have a good public image. We can't be too happy about someone like that becoming the wife of our only son, can we?" he explained calmly. "Hold on a minute," I began, as shock and anger flared inside me. I couldn't let his comment pass unchallenged. What's wrong with being raised by a single parent? My father worked incredibly hard to raise me on his own, and I'm proud of him and my upbringing. Being raised by one parent doesn't make me any less capable or valuable, I said, my voice firm. But they continued to argue. Since you were missing one parent, you couldn't have learned how to be a good wife, how to do housework and such, they claimed. I responded, refusing to let their assumptions diminish me. I did plenty of housework to help my father, and I can cook pretty well too. So please don't say that. Despite my rebuttal, Stephen's mother dismissed my words entirely. "I will allow you to marry Stephen," she said, "but in exchange, you must promise to devote everything to us because we are Stephen's parents. Can you promise that?" I was taken aback. "What?" I stammered, unsure how to respond to such a demand. "Since you came here to ask for our permission to marry our son, you do understand your duties, don't you?" she continued, leaving no room for negotiation. Before I could gather my thoughts to articulate a response, the conversation continued, and it became clear that my in-laws were intent on dominating the discussion. I barely had space to express my views. That night, as I reflected on what had happened, I felt overwhelmed by the encounter and deeply unsettled by the dynamics I was about to enter. The evening had been a wake-up call, and I realized I needed to talk to Stephen about how his parents treated me. "Stephen, do your parents always talk to people like that?" I asked gently, hoping for some understanding or support. He seemed unaffected by my question. "What about it?" he replied, clearly not seeing the issue. I tried again, carefully explaining my concerns. "Well, the way your parents spoke to me, and what they said, doesn't that seem unfair?" Stephen shrugged it off. "Oh really? They were just making sure you're ready for the marriage." I understood that his parents were concerned for their son's future, but their approach had felt excessive. It was troubling that Stephen didn't seem to see it the same way. "I get that your parents are worried, but it felt like too much," I pointed out carefully. "Really? Why is that?" Stephen asked, his tone neutral. "They didn't say anything wrong. Besides, they gave us their blessing to get married, so don't worry about it." His response troubled me. It seemed he was more in line with his parents' views than with understanding my feelings. Sensing my unease, Stephen wrapped his arms around me in a reassuring hug. "Betty, you don't have to worry so much," he said softly. "My parents are just a little upset because their only son is getting married." Though his words were meant to comfort, they only confirmed that he didn't fully grasp my concerns. "It's all going to be fine. Don't overthink it. I'm sure they just want what's best for us. They want us to be as good of a couple as they are. That's why they were a bit harsh," he added. "Oh," I replied, still feeling unsettled. Stephen seemed to think his parents' high expectations were normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't right for them to judge me simply because I was raised by a single parent. I didn't believe that people who expressed such views were truly supportive partners. We are the ones getting married, I thought, and our focus should be on our love, not their approval or disapproval. Although I was upset, I decided not to dwell too much on his parents' opinions. The wedding day soon arrived, and the venue was filled with our relatives, friends, colleagues, and even bosses. As I walked down the aisle, my father beside me, the man who had lovingly raised me on his own, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Stephen and I exchanged our vows and rings, and the room erupted in applause. Despite the challenges, this was our moment, and I was determined to savor it. As Stephen and I walked back down the aisle together, the reality of our marriage sank in, filling me with a joy I had never experienced before. At the reception, the hall was bustling with excitement. Videos of our journey together played in the background, adding a personal touch to the celebration. It was a joyful time, reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in a while and receiving heartfelt congratulations from so many people. Despite my initial reservations about Stephen's parents, the day had turned out to be one I would always cherish. I felt relieved and genuinely happy that I had chosen to marry Stephen. We planned to officially register our marriage after the ceremony, a step that would make our union legally complete. As the day unfolded, I savored every moment, basking in the joy and celebration. But when it came time for the formalities, greeting our guests and acknowledging everyone's support, a sense of unease began creeping in. Stephen's parents, standing beside us, were visibly unsteady, their faces flushed a deep red. It was clear they had indulged too much in the festivities, and some of our relatives quietly asked if they were all right. Though embarrassed, we pressed on, trying to maintain decorum. When it was time for us to address the guests, the situation took an unexpected turn. Without warning, Stephen's mother grabbed my hand, pulling me away from him with surprising force. Her voice boomed as if she were in a wrestling ring, not a wedding hall. "Listen to me, Betty. After this wedding, you're going to devote yourself to us completely. Prepare yourself. We're going to test you hard." The guests murmured, some laughing awkwardly as if it were a joke, but the tension was undeniable. Before I could react, Stephen's father seized the microphone and pointed at me. "Betty, don't you feel embarrassed wearing a dress like that? It doesn't suit you at all," he sneered. His mother nodded in agreement, piling on the criticism. The murmurs among the guests grew louder, turning from amusement to concern. I turned to Stephen, my eyes pleading for him to step in and stop his parents' humiliating outbursts. This was supposed to be our wedding day, a celebration of love, not a spectacle of disrespect. But Stephen stood frozen, making no move to defend me or our union. The situation escalated when his parents, still intoxicated, began making outrageous demands. "After you register the marriage, you should give us a few $1,000s a month, plus your entire bonus," they insisted, their greed blatant and shocking. I felt my face drain of color as I stood there, utterly stunned. My father, who had been watching the scene unfold, couldn't stay silent any longer. He stepped forward, taking the microphone from Stephen's father with a steady hand. "Enough of this," my father said calmly but firmly. "Don't you realize you're making fools of yourselves?" Stephen's parents, instead of backing down, lashed out, mocking my father for being a single parent. "Single parents are never any good," they jeered, their words cutting deeply. But my father didn't falter. His expression remained composed as he replied, "You people are worse than I imagined. You even refuse to meet me because I'm a single father." Then, with a twist that took everyone by surprise, my father revealed something that changed the tone of the room entirely. "I never imagined that someone like you would work for President Roy," my father said, his voice calm yet pointed. "President Roy is a respectable man, and I always assumed his employees would be just as decent." The mention of President Roy, a business partner of my father's and an old friend, visibly shook my father-in-law. His confident demeanor began to crack. My father continued, and speaking of single parents, President Roy was raised by his mother alone. He let the weight of his words settle before delivering the final blow. So, you just insulted the president of the company you work for. The realization hit hard. Stephen's parents' faces fell as they grasped the gravity of their mistake. The room shifted, the power dynamic completely reversed. My father-in-law, once bold and arrogant, now appeared small and desperate. "I apologize, sir," he stammered, his bravado gone. "Please don't tell the president about this." He fell to his knees, pleading, an image that was starkly different from the domineering figure he had been moments ago. For me, this moment was pivotal. It revealed both the true nature of Stephen's family and the strength and connections of my own. But perhaps most telling was Stephen's silence. He stood there, unmoving, unwilling, or unable to protect me from his parents' outbursts. The painful realization struck me: Stephen might never stand up for me. As the tension in the hall reached its peak, guests, caught between shock and amusement, began recording the scene. My father, resolute and unshaken, turned to me. "No matter how much they apologize," he said firmly, "they can't take back their words." He looked me in the eye and asked, "Do you want to leave with me?" Without hesitation, I nodded. I took the microphone from Stephen's limp hand and with a steady voice, addressed everyone in the room. "Thank you for the great entertainment, but there will be no marriage." I paused, making sure everyone, especially Stephen and his parents, understood. "I'll return all the gifts and contributions you've made for this occasion." With that, I left the reception hall, my father by my side. As we exited, I caught a final glimpse of Stephen and his parents, shocked, dismayed, and surrounded by concerned relatives. Behind us, the room descended into chaos. Over the following days, I stayed true to my word. I returned the money and gifts, and to my surprise, many of the guests expressed their admiration for my decision. They commended both my father and me for our integrity and courage in such a difficult situation. The fallout from the wedding was swift and severe for Stephen. His co-workers, many of whom had witnessed the debacle, spread word of the incident. It not only tarnished his reputation but also highlighted his inability to stand up to his unreasonable parents. Embarrassed and unable to face his colleagues, Stephen resigned from his job. The repercussions extended to his father as well. Word of the incident reached President Roy, and he took swift action. Stephen's father was demoted and reassigned to a remote division of the company, a clear message about the company's stance on integrity and respect. Stephen's family found themselves increasingly isolated within their community, shunned by both neighbors and extended family. Their actions at the wedding had led to a social and professional downfall, a stark reminder that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are unavoidable. In the midst of this chaos, my life began to take a new direction. The bond with my father deepened, and we spent more quality time together. One day, he broached a topic that caught me off guard. "Betty, are you interested in running the business?" he asked, his eyes filled with hope and sincerity. I hesitated, unsure. "Do you mean? Why don't you work towards becoming the president of my company?" he suggested, confident in my abilities. The idea was daunting, but his belief in me sparked a sense of purpose. "I'll do my best, I promise," excitement and nervousness swirling inside me. From that moment on, I shifted my focus entirely to my career. Romantic entanglements could wait. I was determined to prove not just to my father, but to myself, that I could excel. I dove into learning every aspect of the business, determined to lead with the same strength and integrity my father had always shown. Looking back on the wedding fiasco, it was clear that Stephen's family had been unreasonable, turning what should have been a joyous occasion into a spectacle. Thankfully, since the marriage was never officially registered, I avoided a legally binding mistake. Now free from the burdens of marital drama and in-law complications, I could fully commit to my career. It was liberating to realize that out of chaos had come clarity, a new direction for my future. I'm eager to see where this path leads, and I wish myself all the best as I embrace this new chapter. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you for being part of this journey. I hope you found something valuable in this story. Stay tuned for more updates, and if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing for the next chapter of my life. Recently, I experienced a shocking incident that left me profoundly unsettled. In an unexpected and unsettling turn of events, my mother-in-law seized my passport and intentionally burned it. The flames quickly consumed the document, reducing it to nothing but ashes in a matter of moments. This abrupt act dashed my plans for a vacation to Street B's Island, leaving me in a state of disbelief. When I confronted her for an explanation, she simply smirked, coldly declaring that since I was a stranger in her eyes, I wouldn't be traveling anywhere but staying home beside her. My husband, Peter, merely offered a grin, complicit in their deceit. Their cruel maneuver was shocking, though not entirely surprising. However, the level of their sneakiness was beyond anything I had anticipated. They seemed to revel in their scheme, sharing laughs over what they considered a triumph. Frustrated and desperate to assert my identity, I reminded them who I was. My name is Kayla. I'm 30 years old and I'm a linguist. I study and teach languages at the university, a role that often requires me to travel abroad for extended periods as I engage with different cultures and share my knowledge. My job demands frequent travel, often taking me away from home for months at a time. Before this career, I never imagined marriage would be in my future. But everything changed when I returned to my home country at 25 and met Peter, who would later become my husband. Despite the challenges posed by my career, which keeps me overseas for about half the year, Peter and I maintained our relationship through constant communication via phone calls and emails. We married when I was 27, and he has been incredibly supportive, even with the long separations that define our life together. As I made my way home from the airport after a 6-month absence, I felt excitement bubbling within me rather than fatigue. I was eager to reunite with Peter, hoping for a joyful reunion and perhaps a resolution to the turmoil his family had caused. Upon arriving home, I discovered that Peter hadn't yet returned, so I started tidying up. Although I always remind him to keep our place neat, I usually find it somewhat disordered. Normally, this would bother me, but today I decided to overlook it because I was simply too thrilled to see him again. As I busied myself in the kitchen, I heard the front door open. It was Peter. Overjoyed, I rushed to greet him. "Welcome home, Peter. It's so good to see you." But his response was lukewarm. "Oh, hi, Kayla. You're back," he said, almost dismissively. After 6 months apart, I couldn't hide my disappointment. "Peter, aren't you going to say you miss me?" I asked, trying to mask my hurt. He shrugged. "We've been doing this for a while, so I guess I'm used to it. I'm just really tired." "Is dinner ready?" he asked, shifting the conversation. "Yes, it's ready. Let's eat." Dinner should have felt special after so many months apart, but today it was tinged with sadness. His attention seemed divided as he constantly glanced at his phone while we ate. I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer. "Hey, Peter, why do you keep staring at your phone?" I asked, trying to mask my irritation. He brushed me off, claiming there's nothing wrong. "But you've been gone, and we've stayed connected through calls and emails, right? There's nothing new to discuss." His dismissive attitude stung. "That may be true, Peter, but it's been a long time since we've been together. Shouldn't that count for something?" My tone sharpened with my growing frustration, and I could see it upset him. He stood up abruptly, placing his phone on the table, and glared at me. "You just came off a plane, but I'm exhausted from work," he snapped, and his words cut deep. "I'm tired too. I came straight here after work." "Don't talk to me like that," I retorted, my voice rising. "I didn't ask you to rush home. You chose to come back immediately," he replied coldly. His words felt like a slap in the face, but I needed to express how I felt. "You don't have to say it like that. Despite everything, I missed you." For a moment, we both paused, the weight of my words hanging heavily between us. After months apart, I had returned only to find the atmosphere chillingly tense. Peter's reception was colder than I had expected. As we sat down for dinner, he blurted out, "I didn't ask you to rush home. If you're going to act like this, maybe you shouldn't have come back at all. You're being annoying, Kayla." Frustrated, he slammed his hand on the table and stormed out of the room, leaving his dinner untouched. Alone and confused, I wondered why he was acting so cold. I had eagerly anticipated our reunion, but it felt like I was the only one excited. What was the point of coming home early if it only ended in disappointment? Tears spilled onto the table as I sat there, the joy of our reunion overshadowed by a sinking feeling of dread. The next morning, the tension still lingered. When I greeted him with a good morning, he shot me a frosty look and said bitterly, "I envy you. You get to relax at home all the time while I'm stuck working." That's not true, I replied, trying to correct him. I have a lot of work too, summarizing our activities, preparing for the next training session. It's more work than you think. He dismissed my efforts with a wave. Sure, but you can do it from home. I wish I had a job where I could take half the year off. Enjoy your time at home, princess. Stunned by his sarcastic tone, I watched as he left the house without another word. We had argued before, but he had never been this cutting. His sarcasm left me puzzled and worried about the growing rift between us, and I found myself pondering what might help mend our relationship. I busied myself with household chores, vacuuming and changing the linens when my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. A sense of unease washed over me as I answered, "Hello, Kayla here." "Hi, Kayla. It's been a while. I heard you're back home and had a rough day yesterday," she said, her tone casual. "Yes, that's right," I replied, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "And I also heard you upset Peter," she added, her voice taking on a sharper edge. He was quite angry. Her words added to my confusion and worry, leaving me questioning how I could bridge the growing gap between Peter and me since my return. Then, during the call, my mother-in-law's suggestion caught me off guard. "Now that you're back, how about we plan a family trip?" she proposed. Before I could process the idea, she continued, "I was talking with my husband about going to Street Barks Island, and Peter mentioned he wanted to join us. You used to travel abroad, right? Could you help us with hotel reservations and other arrangements?" Her request felt loaded. It was clear from her tone that she didn't relish the thought of traveling with me but saw an opportunity to leverage my travel experience. My relationship with her had always been strained. She had never hidden her disdain for me, especially since our first meeting at the wedding reception, where her sarcastic attitude had made a lasting impression. Even after 3 years of marriage, her views hadn't softened. When I was working abroad, she often sent stinging messages questioning my commitment as a wife. "How can you be a wife and stay away from home for months? If you don't take care of the house, I'd rather my son marry someone else. It was a mistake to let him marry you." Those memories made me apprehensive about her proposal. It felt as if I were being used merely to facilitate their travel plans, a task that seemed far more appealing to her than enduring her usual critiques. I was frustrated with myself for my inability to decline, even though I knew I was being manipulated. A few hours later, Peter returned from work in a noticeably better mood than before. He dropped his briefcase on the sofa, flashed a wide smile, and said, "Mom called, didn't she? We can go on a trip to Street Barts." "Yeah, I heard," I replied cautiously. "But you're not thinking of turning it down, are you?" "Mom wants you to come with us," he pressed, his enthusiasm making it even harder for me to express my reservations. I understood his desire for me to be involved, but the dynamics made me uneasy. How could I navigate this situation without escalating tensions or feeling even more used? As the conversation about the family trip continued, I tentatively suggested, "Why don't you just go with your mom and dad as you originally planned?" The moment those words left my lips, Peter's demeanor shifted dramatically. He clicked his tongue, and his voice turned more threatening. "You need to understand your role here. The only time you're useful to us is when we're traveling." His words stung. "You don't have to talk to me like that," I protested. "It's true, isn't it?" he shot back, undeterred. "Anyway, you'll handle all the flight and hotel bookings, and everything should be in my name." "But Peter, you're going to pay for the whole trip," I clarified, trying to understand our financial arrangement. "What are you talking about? We'll split the cost 50-50. It's a small price to pay to show respect to our parents," he argued, implying that my objection was disrespectful. "And what does that mean? If you've got time to lounge around at home, make the reservations now," he demanded. "This isn't right. I don't want to," I mumbled, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you mumbling about?" he scoffed, grabbing a beer from the fridge and downing it in one gulp. Despite my inner turmoil and the unfairness of the situation, I felt cornered, embarrassed, and without a real choice. Reluctantly, I proceeded to make all the arrangements for the flights and accommodations for the trip to Street Barts, just as Peter and his mother had insisted. I was set to pick them up at my in-laws' house and head straight to the airport. But a few days before our departure, I found myself restless and unable to sleep. Late at night, I noticed Peter wasn't beside me. I walked to the living room and overheard him on the phone. "It's okay, Mom. I'll be there first thing in the morning as planned. Please handle the passport issue. Anyway, seriously, I'm looking forward to it." I'll make sure to introduce her to you," he said into the receiver. Hearing this stirred a mix of emotions within me. What was supposed to be a family trip was morphing into a series of commands and manipulations, and now there were secrets involved too. I stood there, unsure of how to confront this new revelation. When I returned home, Peter's conversation still echoed in my mind. He had mentioned a passport and an introduction, and since he was talking to his mother, I was certain she was on the other end. It felt like there were hidden plans that I wasn't privy to, leaving me uneasy about the upcoming trip. Clearly, something was being orchestrated behind my back, but I couldn't grasp the full extent of it. Determined to remain vigilant, I cautiously prepared for our departure. The day of our trip to Street Arts finally arrived. I methodically packed both my carry-on and handbag, including items for my husband, ensuring we were ready for the journey. With everything set, Peter and I drove to my in-laws' house. As we approached, I braced myself, unsure of what awaited us, but ready to face whatever might come. Upon our arrival, it was only my mother-in-law who greeted us. "Oh, hi Kayla. It's been a while. Good to see you. We're almost ready. I just need to grab a few things for the trip, so it might be a little while," she said, her tone casual yet laced with urgency, raising my suspicions even further. "Okay, take your time," I replied, trying to mask my growing unease. I nodded in response, but then she added, "Oh, and Kayla, could you bring the carry-on case from the other room? It's heavy, so please get Peter to help you." "Sure, I'll do that," I agreed, keenly observing the exchange of knowing glances between my husband and mother-in-law. I kept my passport securely in my pocket, an instinctual move born from the mistrust that had been building. Following my husband's directions, I returned to the living room with the carry-on, only to find my mother-in-law waiting for me with a mischievous grin. To my horror, she was holding my passport in her hands. "Now you can't go on the trip to Street Arts," she declared, a smirk spreading across her face. "What do you mean?" I asked, disbelief washing over me. The weight of her words began to sink in. "I'm going to burn this passport right now," she threatened. "What did you just say?" I responded, my heart racing. "I was just using you to handle the trip arrangements," she admitted callously. "You're a stranger here, so you'll be staying behind. Too bad." Her words struck me like a cold slap. The situation was far worse than I had imagined, and the betrayal cut deep. I realized I was not just an outsider in their plans, but merely a pawn in whatever game they were playing. The revelation left me reeling, unsure of how to respond to such blatant manipulation and deceit. In a sudden and shocking move, my mother-in-law stormed into the kitchen, lit a lighter, and set my passport ablaze in the sink. The document quickly caught fire, turning to black ashes before our eyes. "We did it," she triumphantly declared. My husband joined in, cheering, "Yeah, Mom, we made it." "No," I interjected, my voice rising. "It's just the three of us on this trip, right? We'll get to meet Peter's new girlfriend when we get back." "I've already set that up," my mother-in-law replied nonchalantly. "We don't need this useless woman anymore." My father-in-law chimed in coldly, pulling out his cell phone to show me pictures of himself with another woman, a satisfied grin on his face. "I'm not divorcing you for the sake of my reputation, but you'll be staying here while we go on our trip. When we get back, I'll move in with her, and you can leave." My mother-in-law laughed mockingly at his words, and their expressions were filled with malice. At that moment, I realized the depth of their betrayal. I realized I no longer belonged in a family like this. Forcing a smile, I asked, "By the way, whose passport is that?" "What are you talking about? It's yours, of course," she replied confidently. "I took it out of your handbag." "My passport is right here," I said, holding up my actual passport from my pocket. "What? No, it can't be," she stammered, her confidence wavering. I showed her my passport, still intact. "Yes, it's my passport. See for yourself." Panic washed over her as the realization dawned. Her face turned pale. "That's not possible," she muttered, her voice trembling. It seemed my mother-in-law had mistakenly believed she had taken my passport from my handbag without checking thoroughly before burning it. "Whose passport did I burn then?" she asked, her voice quivering with fear and confusion. "I guess it was your son's passport that was in there," I suggested. "You burned my son's passport," she gasped, horrified. My mother-in-law turned white as the weight of her mistake hit her. The already strained family dynamics were now irrevocably shaken by her rash actions and the underlying schemes that had come to light. As the chaos unfolded, my husband's fury erupted. "What have you done? I told you to be careful. I only found one passport in her handbag. Who would have thought it belonged to me? I don't care. You didn't check properly. And now look what's happened," he shouted. "You're saying it's my fault. If you had checked from the start, I wouldn't have made this mistake," she retorted, her voice rising in defense. Their argument escalated quickly, each blaming the other amidst the turmoil. My husband turned to me, exasperated. "Hey, Kayla, do something." But I refused to be dragged further into their mess. "Seriously, who do you think you are, telling me what to do? You cheated on me behind my back. How dare you both? You and your mother are despicable." "Hey, who do you think you're talking to?" My husband snapped. "I'm talking to you and your awful mother. Don't think I'm just going to let this slide. You're going to pay me back for the affair and all the nasty things your mother has said to me," I declared, my resolve hardening. Just then, my father-in-law appeared, drawn by the noise. "What's going on here?" he demanded. After I explained everything, he was livid. The planned trip was immediately canceled, and the fallout was severe. My mother-in-law faced a divorce while my husband was disowned by his father and banned from returning home. I consulted a lawyer and proceeded with the divorce, demanding alimony from both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law. They were required to pay in one lump sum and cover the costs of the canceled trip to Street Nevis Island. Financially unprepared, they had to borrow money to meet these demands. In the end, my ex-husband, now living with his mother, found himself in a tough financial situation. He was also abandoned by the woman he had an affair with. Meanwhile, I used the alimony money to move into a condo and start anew, embracing a life of independence free from deceit and mistreatment. I faced many challenges, but I emerged stronger. Now, I'm loving life, planning to continue my travels, learning about different cultures, and sharing my experiences with the world. Finally, our dream of building a spacious new home had come to life, and my excitement overflowed as I envisioned the fresh chapter ahead of us. Just as we were about to celebrate this milestone, an unexpected twist threw everything into disarray. My in-laws arrived unannounced, their tone leaving no room for discussion as they announced, "We're moving in here," and requested that my parents vacate the property. I was taken aback, glancing at my husband for support, but all he could manage was a deep sigh followed by the words, "Please just do as they ask. Gently let your parents know." As I watched my in-laws eagerly unpack and settle into what was meant to be our new home, disbelief and frustration swirled within me. "Do you realize this is our house?" I asked, hoping they might grasp the misunderstanding. "My name is Tiffany, and at 32, I've enjoyed a loving marriage with my husband Jesse for 4 wonderful years. While we don't have children yet, our life is filled with affection and mutual support. Recently, I have been increasingly concerned about my aging parents. Their declining mobility weighed heavily on my mind, prompting me to suggest that Jesse and I move in with them to provide care." Jesse agreed without hesitation, recognizing the dual benefits of our presence, supporting my parents while also granting us peace of mind. "It's a win-win situation," he had said, and I was grateful for his understanding. As we contemplated this plan, we faced logistical challenges. My family's home was quite far from the city, complicating our commutes, especially since neither of us drives. Relocating my parents to our small rental wasn't feasible either. It was already cramped for just the two of us, and considering future children would only worsen the space issue. In light of these challenges, I proposed a bold solution. Why not build a new home that can accommodate everyone comfortably? Jesse's face lit up at the idea. "That's a fantastic idea," he exclaimed. Energized by his enthusiasm, we began planning and building a home that would suit all our needs. When I shared the news with my parents about our plan to build a house for everyone, they initially felt a pang of guilt for the inconvenience. However, once I explained our reasoning, their apprehension transformed into excitement, bringing me immense relief and joy. Later, Jesse and I visited a real estate agency to finalize the details of our project. We prioritized locations near hospitals for easy medical access for my parents and close to train stations to simplify our daily commutes. During discussions about the house specifics, I noticed my parents were still hesitant about the idea of moving in with us. Thankfully, Jesse offered several insightful suggestions that helped ease the planning process. As we progressed, our dream home began to take shape, and the excitement was palpable. After extensive discussions and considerable online research, we finalized our plans and were ready to consult builders. We were almost there, with the preparations coming together beautifully. I remarked on how building a home was turning out to be far more complicated than I had anticipated. Balancing this project with work was definitely slowing our progress, I said with a sigh. Absolutely, my husband added, reflecting on the challenges we face. We've put so much time and effort into these plans, but seeing the results now, it's been worth it. The blueprint we carefully crafted has exceeded all our expectations. We had consulted numerous real estate agents and spent countless hours on research to get to this point. Now, all that was left to do was wait eagerly for the completion of our dream home. It would take some time, but the excitement and anticipation were boundless. As the project advanced, my in-laws began to show more interest. "We heard you're building a new house. Is that right?" they asked one day. "Yes, that's correct. We're hoping to have it finished by the end of the year," I replied. "How wonderful. I'm so impressed with Jess's hard work and how he keeps us updated with all the details," my mother-in-law exclaimed, showing genuine enthusiasm for our endeavor. When she suddenly expressed interest in visiting soon, I was a little surprised but happily agreed. The following weekend, my husband and I made plans to visit their place. They greeted us with warm smiles, and the conversation quickly shifted to our home project. "Building a new house is such a joyous experience, isn't it?" my father-in-law remarked, his voice nostalgic as if recalling his own memories. "Yes, we're thrilled," I said. "We just hope the construction wraps up smoothly so we can move in as soon as possible." We all shared a laugh over the excitement of the journey ahead. My mother-in-law, curious, asked, "Could we see the blueprints?" My husband pulled out his phone and showed them a photo of the design. "Oh, it's quite spacious," she observed. "And so many rooms." "Yes," I nodded. "We'll be living with my parents, so we needed the extra space." I explained the situation, and both my in-laws looked at my husband in disbelief. "You're all moving in together?" they asked, their tone edged with surprise. "Yes," my husband confirmed. "Since my parents are getting older, we thought it would be best to live together, so we decided to build a new house." "Really? I see," they responded, their tone subtly shifting, revealing a hint of discomfort. Sensing the tension, I quickly changed the subject, hoping to ease the mood. "How have you both been? How's your health?" "We're doing well. No major changes. Just the usual routine," they replied, though it was clear their curiosity about our plans lingered. "Tell us more about the new house. Which room will your parents be using?" they asked. As my husband pointed to the blueprint and began explaining the layout, I noticed the atmosphere had shifted. While he seemed oblivious to it, I could tell from their tense expressions that the news had unsettled them. Still, we continued discussing the house plans, hoping our shared excitement for this new chapter would eventually put everyone at ease. When my in-laws realized that my parents would be moving in with us, I felt a pang of guilt. I worried they might think we were giving my parents special treatment. Despite this, I hoped they would understand our decision, given my parents' age and needs. Yet it was becoming clear that they were finding it hard to accept. The construction of our new home was progressing smoothly, and with each visit, we could see it nearing completion. My husband often expressed his eagerness to move in quickly, but like him, I felt torn between the excitement of starting this new life and wanting everything to be perfect. Halfway through the construction, my parents came to see the progress. Their joy and gratitude filled me with a deep sense of relief and thankfulness that we could provide them with this new home. At the same time, I began to notice my husband had been visiting his parents more frequently, almost every weekend. "Are you planning to visit your parents again this weekend?" I asked him one evening. "Yeah, I am," he replied. I remarked on how often he had been visiting them since the start of the year, to which he responded, "I just want to show them my appreciation. That's why I've been making the effort to visit on my days off." I understood his intentions, recognizing that, like me, he was trying to balance the needs of both our families. I asked, should I come along? I was worried that his parents might feel left out or disappointed, perhaps even hoping they would be the ones moving in with us. I thought visiting them could be a nice gesture of goodwill. However, my husband reassured me, saying, "It's all right, I can handle it on my own." With that, he left for his parents' house. I decided to respect his choice and promised to support him whenever he needed it. Time flew by, and before we knew it, our new house was finally ready. On moving day, we loaded the car with boxes, bubbling with excitement as we set off to our new home. eager to start this new chapter together. As we pulled up, the sight of our house took my breath away. I couldn't help but exclaim, "Wow, our new home." It felt like the start of a brand new adventure. I found myself daydreaming about our life there, cooking meals while watching my husband play with our future child in the yard or hosting family barbecues. These thoughts only heightened my excitement. Just then, my parents called. They were supposed to move in with us, but informed us they would be delayed due to traffic. They urged us to start settling in, but I insisted, "We'll wait for you." I planned to share this sentiment with my husband, but to my surprise, his parents showed up unexpectedly. I stared in disbelief as they got out of their car, all smiles, and approached us. "Look at this magnificent house. It's impressive enough to show off to our friends," they exclaimed. "Yes, it's the house that Jesse and I carefully planned," I replied, feeling a mix of pride and unease. "Tiffany, you have excellent taste," my mother-in-law complimented. "Well, I suppose," I replied, unsure of how to navigate this unexpected visit. "I can give her credit for that," I said, managing a thankful nod. To my astonishment, they began unloading a substantial amount of luggage from their car. Baffled, I quickly asked, "Mother-in-law, father-in-law, why do you have so much stuff? What are you planning to do?" Their reply completely caught me off guard. "What do you mean? We're moving our things into this house," they said. "You're planning to live here starting today?" I asked, my disbelief and frustration mounting. "Yes, but you'll need to ask your parents to leave," they continued. "Why are you doing this?" I inquired, my voice tinged with disbelief. My mother-in-law then explained, "As a new bride, it's customary to prioritize your husband's family." The unexpected twist left me struggling to reconcile the joy of our new beginning with the sudden challenge of balancing family expectations against our carefully laid plans. Feeling overwhelmed, I turned to my husband for support as his parents declared they should be the ones moving into the new house. Taking a deep breath, he said, "Just let your parents know gently." I felt a rush of disbelief. This house was intended for me and my parents. "I can't accept this decision," I protested. His response came with visible irritation. "Didn't my mom just explain that it's natural for a wife to prioritize her husband's family? We can address your parents' situation later." I was stunned. It was painfully clear that my husband was either heavily influenced by his parents or shared their views, which were now glaringly apparent. "Come on, help with the moving," he urged as his parents began unloading their belongings, despite the fact that my parents and I hadn't even set foot inside the house yet. "Oh, how wonderful. The interior is just splendid," they exclaimed, eagerly exploring the space. I confronted them. "Do you even know whose house this is?" They looked at me, clearly taken aback. After a brief pause, they turned to face me and asserted, "Whose house?" "Of course, it's Jess's house. Are you suggesting you have a claim to it?" I was taken aback by their confidence. "Since you and Jesse are living here and he's put so much into building this house, you have no right to make any claims without letting us explain first." It seemed my in-laws had jumped to conclusions and were quick to blame me, indicating that my husband hadn't shared the full details about our financial contributions to the house. "Why would your parents live in Jess's house in the first place?" they questioned. "Yes, it's strange. Poor Jesse having such a demanding wife and parents," they added scornfully. I reached my breaking point. Why am I being criticized for their misunderstandings? If you intend to live here, then Jesse should compensate for the amount spent, I argued, feeling my frustration boil over. "I've contributed to this house," I asserted, facing their disbelief. "How much are you claiming to have paid? It must be a small amount, maybe $100, they mocked. My husband, looking uncomfortable, remained silent. I turned to him, challenging him. "Are you being honest? How high and mighty do you think you are?" He hesitated, unsure of what to say next. "What are you insinuating?" my mother-in-law demanded, her tone authoritative. Noticing my husband's reluctance to address the situation, I decided to clarify things once and for all. "I paid for this house entirely with my savings. If you plan to live here, I expect repayment of $460,000 for the cost of the house." My in-laws were visibly shocked, their mouths hanging open and their eyes wide with disbelief. They quickly turned to my husband for confirmation. "Jesse, is this true? Did Tiffany buy this house?" they asked, struggling to grasp the reality of the situation. My husband nodded slightly, affirming, "Yes, Tiffany bought the house. She was promoted recently and now earns more than I do." He He then admitted something more personal. Even though I've been working for a long time and graduated from a prestigious university, I made a significant mistake at work. I can't be promoted and even took a pay cut. Now I'm earning as much as a new employee. The room fell silent as they processed this news. They never imagined Jesse would be in such a situation. After a moment of stunned silence, their attitude toward me shifted dramatically. Tiffany, we're truly sorry for our earlier comments. We misunderstood everything. Please forgive us and let us stay in this house, they pleaded, their tone full of regret. My husband joined in, bowing deeply. Please, it's my fault for not telling you sooner. Let us stay here with you. Their sudden change in demeanor and plea for forgiveness left me completely taken aback, despite their apologies. I stood firm. No matter how much you plead, I can't accept this. I built this house to live with my parents. If that's not possible, there's no point in keeping it. If you want to live here, you'll need to pay me $460,000. We don't have that kind of money, they replied, their faces falling. Then it seems you'll need to find somewhere else to go, I said, resolute in my decision. Wait, they interjected. We sold our previous home and moved out. As my in-laws realized they could potentially be evicted from our new house, they became desperate. Tiffany, please let us stay. Your parents can live with us too, they pleaded. The thought of living under one roof with both sets of parents seemed unmanageable to me. I can't agree to that. If you sold your house, you must have some funds left. Why not use that to find a flat? Tears welled up in their eyes. The truth is, we lost a significant amount in a bad investment. The money from selling our house and our retirement savings went toward paying off that debt. We have nothing left. I'm retired, and my wife has been a